You won't believe how much I wish this was just another creepy internet story, but reality has a way of shattering those hopes. What I'm about to tell you actually happened, no matter how much I wish it hadn't. It all started with a phone call. Well, actually, it started when my parents decided to invest their hard-earned money in real estate. They live in a small town, and they got the chance to buy a 3-bedroom apartment in the city. Not in the suburbs, but near downtown, right by a subway station in a pretty nice green neighborhood. At first, we were all suspicious. The apartment was in great condition, with one room freshly renovated and the others tastefully decorated. Only the kitchen needed some work. The price was ridiculously low for the city's real estate market. Our realtor couldn't find anything wrong with it. The guy selling it mumbled something about noisy parties with motorcycles and guitars happening nearby. But the apartment was on the 4th floor with double-paned windows, so that excuse didn't hold water. It seemed too good to pass up, so 2 months later, I headed to the new place to renovate the kitchen. I brought a sleeping bag, and after a long day of work, I crashed for the night. That's when I heard it, a child crying behind the wall. It sounded like a young kid, maybe 5 or 6. I couldn't tell if it was a boy or girl, but they were softly sobbing and repeating, "Daddy, Daddy." This went on for a while. At first, I thought I'd discovered the real reason for the low price. Who wants to live next to a crying kid? But then I realized there were no neighbors on that side. It was just the small room that had been recently renovated. I'm not one to jump to supernatural conclusions, so I chalked it up to weird acoustics and went back to sleep. A phone call woke me up at 4:30 a.m. The previous owners had left their landline, and man, I had no idea how loud that thing could be. My first thought was that something had happened to my parents. I ran to answer it, but the line was full of static. I kept saying, "Hello?" but got no response. Then, after about a minute, I heard that same child's voice from earlier. All I could make out was, "Daddy, please don't. I'm scared." Then more static, and the line went dead. This time, I was pretty sure it was a girl's voice. By now, I was freaked out. I threw on some clothes and ran upstairs to check on the neighbors. Maybe there was some trouble, and the kid remembered our number. A grumpy guy in his 40s answered the door in his underwear. I tried to explain about the child and the phone call, but he was too groggy to understand. When I mentioned I was his new downstairs neighbor, he suddenly sobered up. He dragged me into his kitchen, made some instant coffee, and poured a generous amount of whiskey into it. Then he asked me to tell him everything from the beginning. After I finished, he stared at me for a long time, deep in thought. Finally, he topped off my cup with more whiskey and told me the truth. On June 20th of last year, 3 people were murdered in that apartment. A bankrupt businessman shot his 2 daughters and his wife, who was trying to protect them. The youngest girl was only 7 years old. Their bodies were found in the small room, the one that had been renovated. The murders happened at 4:30 a.m. The businessman's name was Mike. His son John discovered the bodies when he came home the next morning. I was ready to believe I was going crazy rather than accept that I was hearing dead children on the phone, but I didn't want to stay in that apartment alone. My neighbor and I stayed up until dawn, and as soon as it was a decent hour, I called my brother to come over. He arrived a few hours later, and we spent the rest of the day working on the tile and baseboards. I slept like a rock that night and didn't hear any voices. In the morning, my brother asked if the neighbor's kid was always so upset and what kind of idiots were calling me in the middle of the night. I choked on my tea and didn't tell him anything. But the next night, I answered the phone again. This time, she managed to tell me her name was Kate and that she was scared. So scared. Then the line went dead. We're renting out the apartment now, and for some reason, the new tenants disconnected the landline and only use cell phones. Her name is Kate. She's terrified. her dad shot her twice, once in the stomach and once in the head. She's so scared, so very scared.